If there's one thing I've learned, it's that there's a line. And when a child crosses it, even one you've poured your heart and soul into, sometimes the only option is to pull the rug out from under them. I had spent over $1 million, maybe even two, funding my daughter Serafina's entire life, from her private schooling to her ridiculously expensive art college degree, and then, her struggling art collective in New York City. For years, I just signed the checks, believing in her talent, believing in her. But when I asked her what she wanted for her upcoming 30th birthday, her response, delivered with a casual, cold-blooded shrug, was, "The best gift you could possibly give me, Dad, would be if you just died, so I could stop waiting for your money." That's what she said to the man who gave her everything. And now I have to ask you, honestly, was I wrong for walking out of that restaurant, calling my lawyer, and canceling every single dollar of financial support I ever planned for her, including the multimillion-dollar trust fund and the funding for her loft studio? Tell me, honestly, if you would have done the exact same thing in my shoes. To truly understand this, you need to know the history, the long, painful road that led to that ice-cold, steakhouse confrontation. Serafina is my only child, a daughter I had late in life. Her mother, my ex-wife Clara, and I divorced when Serafina was only 5. The split was amicable, but the aftermath for my relationship with my daughter wasn't. Clara and I both came from money, and in a way, we both spoiled Serafina, though I always tried to instill some sense of reality, some work ethic, which, looking back, clearly failed spectacularly. I was always the working parent, the one on the phone, building my business, a successful architectural firm, while Clara played the fun parent. When the divorce happened, I insisted on joint physical and legal custody, but the truth is, I overcompensated for my perceived absence with money. That's my central mistake. I see it now. I started paying for everything. The most expensive summer camps, the elite private day school with its absurd tuition, the horses she briefly cared about, and then, the endless requests for just a little more for trips with her friends. Serafina was always an incredibly talented artist, there was no doubt about that. Her passion was genuine, and when she graduated high school, she was accepted into one of the most prestigious art colleges in the country. This is where things started to go off the rails, subtly at first. I was so proud. I told her, "Sarah, follow your dream. Don't worry about the cost. I'll handle it. You just focus on your art." And I did. I paid for the full ride tuition, the expensive art supplies, and a lavish apartment in the city that was far, far nicer than anything a student should have. Her friends were all equally privileged, and they quickly formed an echo chamber of starving artists who never actually had to worry about starving. I remember visiting her once, she was 21, and she scoffed at the idea of taking a summer job, saying, "Dad, that would taint my creativity. Plus, you're rich, why would I work at a coffee shop?" I just let it slide, biting my tongue, telling myself that once she graduated and the real world hit, she'd snap out of it. She didn't. Graduation came and went. She, along with 2 friends, decided to start an art collective, which, in practice, meant they lived in a giant, expensive loft in a trendy part of Brooklyn, which I paid for the lease on, of course, and occasionally put on a show where they sold one $50 postcard to a relative. She had no interest in getting a corporate job, or even teaching, which I suggested. "That's selling out, Dad," was her response. "I'm a visionary. Visionaries don't punch clocks." My heart sank every time I heard that. The checks, however, continued. I was paying for the loft, her health insurance, a very generous monthly allowance that was more than enough to cover food, utilities, and her creative inspiration trips, and I even bought her a car when the lease for the loft was contingent on me providing a personal guarantee. I was her bank. I was her safety net. I was her enabler. The final few years were just a slow, grinding escalation of entitlement. Her demands became statements, not requests. She'd call me, not to ask how I was, but to inform me that I needed to wire $5,000 immediately because her collective needed a new 3D printer for an immersive experience. When I pushed back, just a little, asking her to maybe contribute something, she'd launch into a tirade about how little I understood her artistic struggle and how I was trying to sabotage her career, essentially claiming my money was the least I could do for being a distracted father. I was a distraction. Sure, a constant, 7-figure, full-funded distraction from any need to actually grow up. I'd tried to cut her off before, mind you. I set a date, 6 months after college, where the allowance would stop. That lasted exactly 3 days before she called me sobbing, saying she was going to have to move into a terrible apartment, that she'd lose her collective, and that I was abandoning her. The guilt got to me. I knew it was manipulation, but the idea of my little girl, even a 25-year-old version, feeling abandoned was too much. I caved. I always did. The only thing I held onto was the promise that my money would dry up entirely when she turned 35, when she would also inherit her maternal grandmother's small trust. This was my line in the sand. Or so I thought. And that brings us back to the steakhouse. It was a week before her 30th birthday. I had flown down to New York and booked a table at a very upscale restaurant, ready to present her with a large check, a final, generous birthday gift to clear up the collective's debt and give her a cushion. The conversation started stiffly. She was on her phone, barely looking up. I tried to talk about her art. She complained about her collective mates. I brought up the birthday, and she rolled her eyes. Oh, God, not another check, Dad. What are you even going to get me this year? Another pat on the back for being alive. I tried to joke, maybe a really nice watch, Sarah. And that's when she dropped the bomb. She looked me dead in the eye, without a shred of humor or affection, and said those words. The best gift you could possibly give me, Dad, would be if you just died, so I could stop waiting for your money. The silence that followed was deafening. The waiter was pouring water, his hand actually started shaking. My face must have been completely blank. I felt a physical coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't the shock of hearing it. I knew she was entitled. It was the pure, unadulterated hatred behind the words, the casual cruelty directed at the person who had literally sacrificed his own financial well-being to prop up her delusions for decades. This wasn't a joke. This was her deepest, darkest desire. For me to vanish so the full inheritance would immediately become hers, relieving her of the need to even pretend to be grateful. I slowly placed my napkin on the table. I see, I managed to say, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. You see what, Dad? The truth, she sneered. I'm not a child anymore. I don't need your help. I need what's mine. It's ridiculous that I have to wait. The level of entitlement was so complete, so breathtaking, that it finally broke through the wall of parental guilt and obligation I had built around myself. It was a moment of absolute clarity. She didn't love me. She only loved what I could give her. She didn't see me as her father. She saw me as a wallet with an expiration date. So, that's the situation I was in. 30 years of life, 10 years of enabling, and a single, soul-crushing sentence. I stood up. The waiter recoiled slightly. Serafina was still sitting there, a triumphant, awful smirk on her face, thinking she'd finally broken me down into an early inheritance. Before I tell you what I did next, the action that has completely redefined our relationship and, frankly, changed my life, I want you to pause and think about it. You're sitting across from your child, a grown adult, who just told you they wish you were dead for financial gain. I want you to comment below right now what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have walked away? Would you have tried to talk sense into her? Would you have, like me, finally said, enough? I didn't say anything. I just stared at her for a long moment, a moment I hope she remembers for the rest of her life, and I walked out of that restaurant. I didn't pay the bill. That was on her, her first small dose of reality. I immediately called my private driver and told him to take me directly to the airport. On the drive, I called my longtime corporate lawyer, Mark, and told him to scrap everything. Mark knew the whole story. He'd been warning me for years about Serafina's behavior. Mark, I said, my voice shaking with a cold rage I'd never felt before, cancel the lease on the Brooklyn loft. Cancel her monthly allowance, effective immediately. Cancel her car insurance. And finally, cancel all provisions for Serafina in my will, including the primary trust one set up when she was born. I want the entire estate, upon my death, to be given to the Children's Hospital Foundation I've supported for 20 years. Mark, bless him, only asked one thing. Are you absolutely sure, sir? This is final. It is, I confirmed. And tell her, I added, my voice steeling, that her wish has been granted. She no longer has to wait for my money. The fallout was biblical. Serafina didn't call me that night. She probably thought I was just throwing a tantrum. The next day, however, she couldn't get her morning latte because her debit card was declined. She called me, furious, demanding to know what was going on. I let it go to voicemail, twice. She then showed up at my hotel. I hadn't left yet, banging on the door, screaming. When I finally opened it, Her face was contorted in a mixture of confusion and pure, entitled indignation. My card is declined. The landlord called about the rent. What the hell is going on, Dad? She shrieked. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I saw her clearly. Not the little girl I remembered, but the monster I had created. You asked for the best possible gift, Serafina, I said, my voice calm, devastatingly calm. You asked for me to die so you could get my money. I can't die on command, but I can stop being your bank. I have cancelled everything. The loft, the allowance, the car, and your inheritance. You wanted me out of your financial life? Done. Consider it a late 30th birthday present. You are entirely on your own. The look on her face when she realized I was serious was priceless. The color drained from her cheeks, and the entitlement turned to terror. She tried to cry, she tried to rage, she tried to bring up the past, but I didn't budge. Find a job, Sarah. Any job. Sell the worthless junk in your loft. Get a second job. Start over. Maybe a little struggle will give your art some authenticity. I closed the door on her and left the city an hour later. The consequences were swift and total. Within 2 months, she lost the loft and had to move in with one of her collective mates, the only one whose parents hadn't immediately followed my lead, though I hear they are thinking about it. She burned through what little savings she had. Her collective dissolved, apparently. Creative collaboration doesn't survive having to split the cost of rent. She's tried to sue me, claiming I promised her the trust fund, but Mark had the documents airtight. She's called me every expletive under the sun, she sent me the most venomous emails you can imagine, and she even tried to get my ex-wife, Clara, to intervene. Clara was disgusted by what Serafina said to me and, for the first time, backed me up completely, telling her daughter that she had to learn a hard lesson. My daughter, the visionary artist, is now working 2 dead-end jobs, a barista and a gallery assistant, which, funnily enough, is what I suggested 10 years ago. She hasn't created a piece of art since, she's too busy working. Is she miserable? Absolutely. Do I regret it? Not for a second. The greatest lesson I learned is that sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is administer tough love in its most final and unyielding form, especially when your child has mistaken your love for an endless resource. Her cruel wish for my death was the final straw that cut through my lifelong guilt and my financial enabling. I lost a daughter, perhaps forever, but I regained my self-respect and my future financial freedom, which is now dedicated to a cause that genuinely needs it. I sleep better now, knowing I won't die the fool who funded his own child's hatred. So, tell me, was I wrong? Was I too harsh? Or was this the only way to save her, and more importantly, save myself? Like this video if you are on my side in this truly awful situation, subscribe for more stories like this one and the tough choices we have to make in life, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comment section below. I want to read what you all think. I'll see you all in the next story.